All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just gonna hop right in here. Okay. So you are coming to us from Bombora. You're an expert when it comes to data and having those conversations every day. So high level, can you just give me a brief summary of the role that intent data plays today in the sales process, and why is it crucial that modern sales leaders are starting to leverage this more?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to. I think there's a lot of different roles that intent data does and can play today. I think from a historic perspective, we've spent as B2B sales and marketers many decades, but especially in the last decade with the proliferation of automation tools, ability to automate a lot of our processes and workflows, right? We've created a lot of content and a lot of messaging, and in many cases, a lot of noise, right? Because we, in some cases, are trying to push our message out to the masses. And one of the core things that intent data really helps with is being able to understand who's actually interested in receiving that message, right?
Right.
Of our total addressable market, which are the companies right now that may actually be interested in our offerings and capabilities? And with that understanding, we, as both sales and marketing, can be a lot more targeted in who we approach with what message and when. And we can do that in a way where our messaging can actually be informed by what the buyer's interested in, so that we're promoting content and messaging that is educational and that's also relevant and timely.
Absolutely. And you mentioned sales and marketing. And typically when we're producing content, we're speaking to that sales audience. But more and more, the line between what sales and marketing, who they're targeting, who they're talking to, it's blurry. So I'd be really curious also to just kind of hear your thoughts on when we're looking at these intent signals. Sales may interpret it one way, marketing may be creating content, as you mentioned, or thinking of it in a different way. But how have you seen successfully sales and marketing coming together around shared data points?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to start my career in the advisory space around aligning sales and marketing. And so this notion of how do sales and marketing really come together to approach a more holistic strategy is an important one. Intent data has become pretty quickly one of the core data sets around which sales and marketing can align. So, for example, if I've got a total addressable market, that's the companies I could sell to, right, in my space, I want to understand which of those companies are actually most interested right now. And by doing that, marketing can be providing things like branding, programmatic advertising, awareness programs, driving demand gen, using some insights around what content and what topics specifically our prospects are researching and what they're most interested in to actually help form and inform their messaging architecture and their content strategy. If sales is also using the same data point, intent data in this case, to prioritize the accounts that they're going after, whether that's the account executives in their territory, or if that's a business development or sales development rep team, you may have, especially in a large enterprise, those folks may have hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts on a list that they may be trying to penetrate and drive engagement with. Being able to understand how to prioritize which are the accounts I should call on first.
Yeah.
And also, again, from the insights perspective, what should I be saying? What's going to
Yeah.
resonate? What's going to be that first, subject line in an email, or that first 10-second hook when I get them on the phone, that's going to
Right.
demonstrate to them that I have some level of understanding of what's actually interesting, I should say, for them right now is hugely important.
Well, and it sounds too, intent data to me signals this, and you know it best because you said it's your background, but intent data seems like a no-brainer that sort of solves that debate, because marketing, I might think I've got the most killer piece of content for you, and the sales team's like, yeah, we never use this. It's garbage. And so it seems like intent data is a promise of breaking down that silo a little bit, between who thinks they know best. It's like the data's solving the debates there. So I love that. So we can't, I feel like, make any content right now without addressing 2020, and just the sort of watershed moment in just doing business and really being alive as a human on earth. It changed everything. It really affected, every market, every sector. It's the common theme there. But where we saw it, and I think you would agree with this, where we saw it the most was with the expanded buying committee. So just, maybe traditionally we were marketing to, VP and above salespeople, maybe an enablement person. Suddenly we had, the CFO like on a first call, or so on and so forth. So, as we saw that sort of happen, we see the stakeholders become more diverse, these personas that are in the mix that you don't have content to address, you don't have a cadence to throw them into because you don't know how they work. How can sellers, from your vantage point, better use the data that you guys are providing, or that's available to them, to better anticipate who's going to be in those conversations? So how can you sort of identify who's shopping, who's there, and how are people using that data to shorten the buying cycle, or at least get closer to nailing down how they need to talk to these people?
Yeah, it's interesting what we've seen, and I'm sure many of the viewers here have seen this, is that expanded buyer committee, right, is driven in part by the desire or need to do a bit of a deeper dive in assessing the vendors that they ultimately are going to engage with, right?
Yeah.
There's the need for building stronger and stronger business cases. There's more scrutiny around spend, which is where you see in your example that, the CFO and finance
Right.
coming to the table. And so there's a couple of things there. One, that's part of what's driving the comments and notions by companies like Gartner that, by the end of 2022, we're going to see more than 70% of B2B marketers leveraging some form of third-party intent data, right? To better understand who are the companies, again, where should we be spending our, in some cases, limited and more limited marketing dollars, right? Where should we be prioritizing the focus of some of our most expensive resources, which are sales folks in many cases, right? And how can we help ensure that we are going to be one of the first vendors to the conversation, right? Because we also know, Forrester's got a quote out there. I think that's about 74% of the time, the first provider to the conversation that helps craft that solution, helps understand what the buyer is trying to accomplish, is ultimately going to win the deal, right? Yeah. So having an early opportunity sign or an early warning sign in the case of churn for some companies is really can be really impactful. And part of this intent world, at least the way that we view it, is not only being able to say, hey, we know that there's someone downloading a white paper, right? That's interesting, but it might not necessarily be actionable, because that person's job, if they're in IT, they're probably always consuming content around security and storage and networking. What we really want to understand is when there are more people from a given company consuming more content of higher relevancy on a particular topic or topics than they normally do. In our world, our version of intent data, that's where we say, okay, we can tell that a committee's coming together, a decision is being made, they're entering a buyer's journey, and we want to be early to that conversation. And that's a lot of the work that we do with our clients in helping them understand, how do we actually, it's great to have these insights and to have this data at our fingertips,
right?
But how do we put it in action and workflow, right? And how do we use it to identify those companies early on? From a churn perspective, we can look at our existing clients to say, if we see existing clients of ours out doing a significant amount of research around topics related to our offerings, we may have a cross-sell or upsell opportunity on our hands. If they're also doing a lot of consumption around, competitor names, for example, we may also have, a bit of the canary in the mine shaft, right? They may be out seeking alternatives. And in either of those situations, we want to know that early and often.
That is wonderful. Well, thank you so much for these quick hits on why it's important. I would love to keep talking to you. I probably will.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Thanks, Jamie.
Yep.